kind of imagine this would be like Mel B's wedding night. A lot of
Lots of anticipation, not much promise or delivery.
You may have seen Simon Cowell's magic on American Idol, The X Factor, or Got Talent. He is the best at turning regular individuals into global superstars. But there is a narrative behind the fame, money, and constant applause that few people really know. A narrative of grief, loneliness, and an unending drive that, no matter what, couldn't protect him from the harsh truths of life. Today, we're going to look at the very personal and often traumatic life of Simon Cowell, one of the smartest people in TV history. Before we go on, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for future updates. Let's get started. The rise of a TV genius. Simon Cowell is more than simply a TV star. He's a phenomenon. Simon started out as a mailroom clerk and worked his way up to become the most powerful person in entertainment. His sharp eye for talent changed the entertainment business and gave the world some of its biggest performers. For decades, Simon set the standard for what it meant to be a strong person on TV. Shows like American Idol and The X Factor changed the way music and entertainment would be in the future. But even though he made legends, there is an aspect of Simon's life that most people don't know about. This section shows how celebrity and success can often come at a terrible cost. The sad truth about being famous. Simon Cowell's life was dark and painful before the lights, cameras, and applause. Simon was born in Lambeth, London, in 1959. His family looked dazzling on the outside, but they were emotionally broken. His mother was a ballet dancer and socialite who was not very close to him. His father was a severe music entrepreneur who did not show him any love or care. Simon once stated, "My father never said, 'I'm proud of you,' even when I needed it the most." This lack of emotional support left a lasting mark on Simon, which drove him to prove himself to the world. But that empty feeling would stay with him for the rest of his life, even after he became famous. From the mailroom to the top. Simon was rejected and invisible when he was young. He wasn't the best student or the one who stood out in school. He spent his teenage years in the shadows, carrying the weight of his family's high expectations, but never getting the acclaim or acceptance he wanted. By the time he was in his late teens, he had failed and been turned down too many times to count. His father got him a job in the mailroom at EMY Music because he felt he had to, not because he was proud of him. Simon felt the most alone when he was surrounded by stars. He spent his days serving coffee to producers who didn't know his name and organizing fan mail for singers whose songs were at the top of the charts. He was a forgotten character. But instead of giving up, Simon found his strength in the flames of rejection. He wouldn't let himself stay hidden. Every failure and every door that closed simply made his drive stronger. The path to reinvention. In the 1980s, Simon took a chance and started his own company, Fanfare Records, alongside EA and Burton. At first, it looked like the perfect comeback. Simon started to taste success when his songs, like Sunita's So Macho, got a lot of attention. But, like many stories in the world of entertainment, the good times didn't endure. The market changed, the trends changed, and what looked like a strong empire fell apart swiftly. The changing music scene was too much for Simon's label to handle. Fanfare Records was a shell of its former self by the end of the decade, and Simon was left with nothing except debts and the pain of failure. He went back to his parents' house and shut himself in the same childhood bedroom that had earlier been so lonely. How much success costs. Even though Simon Cowell has had a lot of success and is famous all over the world, his personal life is very different. It's a narrative of anguish, loneliness, and a constant search for approval. He said that the failures almost killed him and felt like a ghost that was following him around. In an industry where the stakes are high and the brutality is always there, Simon's story is a clear example of how fragile success can be. Still, something amazing came out of all of this. Simon got back up after failing, stronger, more determined, and ready to make a mark on the world that would last forever. A tribute to the life of Simon Cowell. If Simon's shows ever made you happy, sad, or inspired, please take the time to say thank you. His narrative is about giving up, working hard, and never giving up on your aspirations. But let's not forget the hidden challenges he experienced, the conflicts that celebrity couldn't protect him from, even though he got a lot of plaudits. Simon Cowell's legacy is more than simply his success on TV. It's a story of strength that is still going on, even at 65. If you haven't already, be sure to like and subscribe to get more behind-the-scenes stories about the most famous people in the entertainment business. Simon Cowell, the man behind the empire, from ruin to reinvention. One of the most amazing stories in the entertainment world is how Simon Cowell came back from defeat. What started off as a string of terrible failures would eventually make him a world-famous figure. Today, we'll look into Simon's amazing journey from being a man on the edge of being forgotten to becoming one of the most important people in television. If you want to know more about the real, uncensored truth behind Simon Cowell's narrative, don't forget to like and subscribe for more in-depth information about the untold stories of the entertainment industry. The fall of Fanfare. Simon's first fight. The failure of Simon Cowell's record label, Fanfare Records, didn't break him. It made him stronger. Simon was not just trying to rescue his reputation at the lowest point of his career, he was also trying to stay alive. When Fanfare suddenly went out of business and left Simon with nothing but bills and disappointment, he was at a crossroads. He could either fade into oblivion or fight his way back into the business that had already crushed him once. The rise of a survivor, starting over from scratch. In the early 1990s, Simon went back to the music business, but this time he wasn't a rising star. He was a man who had failed. People at BMG talked behind his back and didn't believe him. His reputation was in shambles, and every handshake reminded him of how Fanfare had fallen apart in a humiliating way. But Simon's refusal to let his past beat him made him rethink all he thought he knew about fame and music. He stopped chasing timeless talents and instead concentrated on what the people wanted. Simon understood that it didn't matter what the critics thought. What mattered was what regular people bought. He later said, "Sell records first, earn respect later." This unpleasant yet necessary discovery was the first step toward his future achievement. Accepting the unlikely. Simon started signing performers that the music business didn't want, notably pop groups like Five, boy bands like Westlife, and ballad duos like Robson and Jerome. People who didn't like them made fun of them. Writers laughed, but they sold millions of records. The industry still thought he was cheap, so every achievement was marred by their derision. But Simon didn't care. He learned the most important lesson of all. Being famous isn't about being perfect. It's about making connections. With each smash single, Simon got closer to changing the face of entertainment, all while staying completely focused on what the audience really wanted. The turning point of Pop Idol. Pop Idol changed Simon Cowell's life in a big way in 2001. A lot of people didn't think Simon could make it on TV because they thought he was too rude, too harsh, and too cold to win people over. The crowd, on the other hand, labeled what they did cruelty. His no-nonsense style and raw honesty thrilled viewers, and Pop Idol quickly became a global phenomenon. People knew Simon because he was honest, had a keen tongue, and didn't sugarcoat failure. Rejection no longer defined his career. Power, influence, and the opportunity to change an entire industry did. From Pop Idol to world domination, the triumph of Pop Idol was only the start. When American Idol started in 2002, Simon Cowell's fame expanded even further. The show made him a global star. Millions of people tuned in week after week, not simply to hear the singers, but also to hear Simon's opinion. His sharp comments, raised eyebrow, and long silences became as famous as the acts themselves. With The X Factor and Got Talent, Simon's empire grew even more, extending all over the world and making him the most powerful man in TV. By the middle of the 2000s, Simon's shows were being watched by more than 600 million people in 100 countries. He had really gotten famous all around the world. Fatherhood, a fresh start. The story of Simon's life changed a lot when his son Eric was born. His world was no longer defined by ratings, contracts, or TV schedules. It was now about small hands, bedtime stories, and the simple pleasures of being a father. Later, Simon said, "My priorities changed completely. All of a sudden, my world wasn't about ratings or contracts anymore. It was about him, the healing power of being a father." Being a father didn't erase Simon's prior faults, but it did give them a new significance. The fact that Simon's change was real made it interesting. It wasn't set up for the cameras or planned by publicists. It was clear in the way the edges of a man who used to be sharp and in charge had become softer. He became more patient and less harsh, and his humility deepened in ways that success could never teach him. The fire that almost killed Simon was like a crucible that shaped him into a different person, less arrogant, more vulnerable, and more human. It reminded me that even the strongest people are weak, and that we learn the most from our mistakes, not our successes. His mother's death was a heartbreaking loss. In 2015, when Simon was just starting to be a father, life handed him another blow that no amount of celebrity or money could soften. Julie Brett, his mother, died when she was 89 years old. It was the end of a long existence for the world, but for Simon, it was a disaster. Julie had been his rock during a tough upbringing, the person whose acceptance he had always wanted, even though she rarely said it. You could feel Simon's pain. He stopped being in the public glare, canceled plans, and went into seclusion to grieve. When his mother died, he had to deal with a deeper loss, the death of his father, Eric, in 1999. Simon has always regretted that his father didn't get to watch him go from being broke to being a TV mogul. Simon felt like the last link to his past had been cut when his mother died. "I lost my mom," Simon said. "It was the hardest thing I've ever been through. It was hard to handle the silence when she died. It was a harsh reminder that losing someone you love is something that can't be replaced, no matter how successful you are." A tragic accident. The Titan broke. In August 2020, when Simon was 60 years old, he had one of the worst struggles of his life. A mistake while testing an electric bike at his Malibu house caused a severe fall. Simon was within a minute of not making it because his back broke in several places. This accident was a harsh reminder for a man who had built an empire on being in charge of everything. Getting better was incredibly hard. He had 6 hours of surgery, during which a steel rod was put in his spine. The doctors told him that if he moved the wrong way, he could be permanently paralyzed. The pain in my body was terrible, but the mental toll was just as bad. Simon had always been known for his control, his posture, his sharp clothes, and the way he carried himself. Now, he was having trouble sitting up in bed or lifting a glass of water. A second blow. Another e-bike crash. Fate struck again, just as Simon was starting to get well. Simon had another e-bike accident in early 2022. This time, he broke his arm and bruised his face. The injuries were not as bad as the first collision, but the mental effects were terrible. Headlines made fun of him for being careless and weak, which was a harsh echo of his last fall. The mirror of mortality. A self-inflicted injury. Simon Cowell had to deal with a lot of physical and emotional problems, but he also had to deal with public scrutiny that he had never expected. For years, he had dabbled in cosmetic enhancements, but by 2021, his appearance became the subject of ridicule. His face, which used to be very expressive, looked frozen, and his typical smile was gone. What happened to Simon Cowell's face was all over the news, and people made fun of him online non-stop. This was a cruel twist of fate for Simon. He had created an empire on power, but he couldn't control his own reflection. He later said in interviews, "I went too far." The alterations Simon made to himself became a sign of what he had been striving to manage for most of his life: his image, the mirror's reflection, losing himself. "I looked in the mirror at one point and really didn't know who I was." These comments weren't only about how things looked. They were a confession of life. It was humiliating for a man who had worked his way from obscurity to become one of the most famous people on the globe to lose recognition in his own image. It wasn't about vanity. It was about losing control over the one thing Simon had always used to identify himself: his image. The change in priorities, being a father, and thinking. The birth of Simon's son Eric was what made him want to change. He said, "I don't need to be everywhere anymore. I just want to be there when Eric laughs." He started to feel better when he stopped pursuing ratings and started to enjoy the simple pleasures of being a father. Simon started to enjoy life outside of the spotlight, finding meaning in family time instead of in other people's praise. Tragedy strikes. Liam Payne's sudden death. A terrible tragedy destroyed Simon's life in September 2024. The boy Simon had found at 16, Liam Payne, whose voice contained unbreakable promise, was abruptly gone. Liam died at the age of 31 after he fell from a hotel balcony in Buenos Aires. This loss was more than just the death of a celebrity for Simon. It was the loss of family. Liam wasn't just another contender. He was part of the group that Simon had meticulously put together in 2010 to become One Direction. Simon thought back to the first audition when Liam laughed nervously and his eyes showed a hint of resolve. According to Simon, losing Liam was like losing a son. This loss was not the same as when his parents died or when he almost died in an accident in 2020. Liam's death was not natural. It was a brutal reminder of how precious life is. A father's grief, mourning the unfinished journey. While the rest of the world mourned Liam, Simon's grief was very private and deep. The billionaire who used to be in charge stopped projects, turned off cameras, and opted to stay quiet. Simon didn't think about his worldwide goals. Instead, he focused on his son Eric and held him tighter than before. Every laugh and every bedtime story with Eric seemed different, like they were more important, since life is fragile and moments are holy. Legacy and presence over empire. Simon saw life differently after Liam Payne died. He stopped talking about ratings and developing an empire and started talking about legacy, family, and being there. His voice, which used to be full of harsh criticisms, became softer when he realized how quickly life may pass. Liam Payne's death made Simon realize the actual cost of fame, how short life is, and how important it is to spend time with the people we love. Not an empire, but a legacy of empathy. Simon Cowell is no longer the harsh judge or mogul who ruled TV. He is a father, a philanthropist, and a man who values leaving a legacy more than making money. He has had a hard life, but he has survived and learned what really important. His change from empire builder to humble mentor shows how strong love and family can be, as well as how strong resilience and vulnerability can be. Simon's narrative is a poignant reminder that the most important thing we leave behind is not what we construct, but how we love, how we persevere, and how we accept the passing of time. Simon Cowell tells us that even famous people are human, and their flaws are what make them strong. Simon has changed a lot on his trip, and his narrative shows us how important it is to slow down, appreciate the people we care about, and accept the obstacles that life throws at us. The true measure of legacy is not money or celebrity, but the ability to love, learn, and grow, no matter what happens. If Simon's story moves you, be sure to like this video and subscribe to get more tales on the human side of famous people. What have you learned from Simon's journey? Please share your opinions below.